Hello, everyone. I'm Michael. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Vicarius, and I want to start with a quick question. How many vulnerabilities, in your opinion, are being discovered every day, on average? How much? 42. Any other guesses? 200. Okay. One less guess. How many? 42 million. I hope not, but... So we have an average of 92 vulnerabilities that are getting discovered every day. And that's a funny number because, as we all know, the US has cut the funding for MITRE. So a lot of the vulnerabilities are not getting assessed, right? So the real number is much higher than what we see here. We also see an increase in the number of vulnerabilities that are getting discovered on a yearly basis. Any ideas why? They discussed before on the panel about it. Why do we have such an increase in vulnerabilities? That's correct. We can see on this graph. So ChatGPT came out in 2023, right? And this is the same time that MITRE cut the funding for the National Vulnerability Database, so we have a huge backlog. So it's not only that there are a lot of vulnerabilities that are getting discovered using AI tools like EvilGPT and others, and WarmGPT and more. We don't have the capabilities and the resources even to analyze them. So we don't even know how big the challenge is right now. And you can see that the numbers are overwhelming. We also see that it's exponential. It's no longer growing linear. So this year we're going to have many more vulnerabilities, and next year we're going to have even more. So the curve is going to become much more sharp going up. And what are the biggest problems in this process? So the first problem is that if a certain vulnerability is getting discovered, we have a pretty extensive process internally in order to discover the vulnerability and assess how it's affecting our infrastructure. One, if there is a certain golden image or there is a certain software that we have in a certain asset, it's probably going to affect a bunch of others. So each vulnerability can multiply, and it's also growing exponentially as much as we add more assets. The second point is that traditional approaches for remediations are hard. We heard it before. Patching is tough. Sometimes you deploy a patch for security purpose. It will change the software, and features in the software are going to be acting funny. We don't really know to assess what's going to happen. And the third one is that, as we all know, we don't have enough people to do that. And even when we have enough people, the capacity and the time frames that we have in order to deploy patches and do all this kind of changes is limited to begin with. So this discussion is about how can we use community, and how can we generate information from crowdsource information in order to make this process better? How can we encourage remediation? So the first thing we can do is we can consume things like CISACAV and see which vulnerabilities are having a known exploit in the wild, and we can prioritize them first, right? So this is one. The second point that we can do is diverse expertise and crowdsource. We can have our team going on communities or consuming APIs and things like that in order to have more information about certain vulnerabilities. So both of these things are more related to information. Early warnings, again, we need our teams to have expertise and know where to look for vulnerabilities data and how to consume this data in a way that will make it more effective for them in order to prioritize the things internally, because the internal process is also tough. We're going to talk in a second about how Vicarius is doing it with a community called vSociety. So we already know that attackers and adversaries are using AI in order to do bad things. How can we use AI in order to do good? How can we defend with AI? So the first thing we can do, we can take the same tools that attackers are using and make benefit out of them and discover vulnerabilities and exploit even before they become well known to attackers, and preemptively fix them or let the vendors know. But here we have a pretty big gap, because every time a certain vulnerability is getting discovered, for example, if I or any of you will report a vulnerability to MITRE, we're going to have pretty extensive process until it will be identified as vulnerabilities, reported to the vendor, and then the vendor will start working on a patch. And even after the patch is released, we're going to have another cycle internally, because when a patch is released, it's not instantly getting deployed all over the assets for a certain organization. It takes time, change processes. We can automate the patching process, but as we all know, it's hard. Some areas in the network, some areas in the infrastructure, we probably go ahead and automate it. For example, desktops and things like that. But other servers, even staging servers, definitely production servers, we can't really do that in a way that won't breach our SLA, either in front of our internal users or against the users of the platform that we're providing. And the last one, which is something we're going to touch on in a second, we can have compensating control, right? So we have 3 ways to fix vulnerabilities. First one is patching, of course. The second one is scripting and configuration changes. And the third one is another compensating control that might make a certain vulnerability unexploitable, even if we know that we have it on a certain asset. This we're going to touch in a second. You can click on the... Yeah, so this is vSociety. Thanks. vSociety is a product that my company, Vicarius, has launched. The purpose of vSociety is to build a community that's its sole purpose. We don't want to be the next Facebook. We don't want to be Twitter or anything. We want to build content that revolves around vulnerabilities on how to fix, understand, and detect them. Okay? The way it's built is built in a way that everything revolves either around a certain vulnerability, or if there is a certain CV assigned to a certain vulnerability, we're going to have to attach it to version softwares and operating system versions. But it all revolves around can you click? I can't move it to the next one. It all revolves around CVs, how to fix them, how to remediate them, etc. And this is what was on our mind when we built vSociety. So on the right end, VRX. VRX is our product. Vicarius VRX is a remediation product, meaning that it's a consolidated solution to do assessment, asset management, asset inventory, operating system inventory, software inventory, etc., prioritization, and remediation. So the product itself already have today scripting capabilities, patching capabilities, and virtual patching capabilities, so it's all there. Now, what we thought with vSociety is that we wanted a scalable way in order to push more content into the scripting engine that will increase the number of compensating control that we might have for our users. So what we did, we built vSociety. vSociety is a completely open environment, meaning that anyone can go register on vSociety, consume the information, can even take a whole script to remediate or detect a vulnerability. It's all available there, even if you're not a user. And around vSociety, we build kind of ecosystem that allows people to get rewarded. So it's not completely, we don't expect people to work for us for free. In case someone is publishing content on vSociety, he gets something called vCoin. With those vCoins, he can do a bunch of stuff. He can convert them into money, but he can also go to a new product we launched called vStore and buy hacking tools. He can go and buy Raspberry Pi. He can buy all this kind of cool stuff that hackers love. Once the content is being validated by our community managers, it's getting published on vSociety, and then upon validation, it's being pushed into our product. So our users get instant and rapidly updating content on how to fix vulnerabilities, even when a patch or other compensating control that might hurt their infrastructure not available. Other than this, we also have a bunch of other things that we're doing to the community, and this is mostly related to the branding and stuff. Now, this is pretty interesting. When ChatGPT came out, we saw that the users of vSociety stopped writing the scripts on their own. They were going to ChatGPT. They were telling ChatGPT, please write a remediation script for CV1234. Take it, go back, and get free money from us. Okay, so they were getting the vCoins for free, and we said to ourselves, okay, we can fight it. Like, we can try all the time, figure out which vulnerabilities were, like which scripts were AI-driven from ChatGPT, or we can just go along with it. So what we did is we took all the scripts that we had in the community, the ones that were manually written, and we built our own AI engine that called VulnGPT. And the sole purpose of VulnGPT is to write remediation and detection scripts. Okay, so instead of someone manually going to vSociety and writing those scripts, we have now AI model that we're not only sharing it with our users, we're also going back to the community and feedback the community. So in vSociety, you might see user content, meaning user-generated content that people uploaded there, but you can also see VulnGPT content. And both of them are consumable for free, completely public. We don't limit the access to it. Other than this, of course, we talked before about the fact that you always need to trust your vendors. We don't have automatic process from vSociety or VulnGPT directly to the product. We have internal product called vAdmin. In vAdmin, we validate that the scripts are not malicious, that the attachments are not a malware or anything like that. And only upon validation, then it's being pushed into the product. And this is our way both to make the product better, contribute to the community, and of course increase our branding. Not that it's interesting for you guys, but you can go ahead and just consume it. We recently also opened vSociety to API keys. If you guys aggregate a lot of content from many resources, you can also aggregate this content from vSociety. Okay. Can you stop here? Go a bit backward. No, in the video, yeah. So what we can see here, you can mute the sound. You can mute the sound. Yeah. So what we see here is the ecosystem of vSociety. So users contribute to the community, validate scripts, and then they get vCoins, and then they can spend those vCoins on vStore. And we have a bunch of other products that we're going to launch. A product called vAcademy, and another product that we already launched last week called vStore. So what we're trying to do is to create a whole ecosystem that will fit itself and make both the community and the product better. And afterwards, and now we're going to see, so this is the ecosystem, and now we're going to see how we take this content and push it. This is the sub-brand, and now we're going to push it back to the product. Users are not necessarily need to deploy patch. Doesn't mean that we don't have the patches in the product. We do have a way to deploy the patches, but as we all know, the world is not perfect. Even when there is a patch, sometimes we cannot really deploy it, or sometimes it's just it just takes the vendor a lot of time to deploy that patch. This is our way to build like a very scalable and auto-feeding remediation engine. And I would like to give some tips here on how to make your remediation program better, even if you're not Vicarius users yet. I hope you will become one day. So first, have IT and security working under one roof, meaning that they will have either the same product, or they're going to have products that are highly integrated to each other and can work seamlessly. A lot of times what we see with customers is that the process of scanning vulnerabilities and remediating them is not synced, meaning that they will scan for vulnerabilities, they will have a huge list, and then they will fix a lot of them, probably by IT or DevOps, but the only way for them to scan again for vulnerabilities and understand that a certain vulnerability was remediated is to run a consecutive scan. A lot of times it's clunky, it's not really working well. So a key for a scalable remediation program is all the time validate that your actions were affecting your risk posture in a way that is reducing threat. And if it doesn't, you need to change, you need to do something different. Use AI and automation. Of course, as I said before, we have vSociety. You guys can consume it completely for free. There are other projects that can assist you with building remediation scripts, on analyzing vulnerabilities, even prioritizing vulnerabilities, and things like that. And leverage community insights. So CISA-CAV has become standard. We have today also EPSS, which is a replacement for CVSS. All these tools, all these things that are being shared completely for free are good tools that we can use. There are open source products like Nmap and others that can assist you with vulnerability scanning in times where, in areas or times that you don't want to use other vulnerability assessment scanner or you don't want to pay a lot of money for them. Leverage community insights. So as I said before, we see a lot of big companies that are aggregating a lot of data. And for example, if they know they have a certain CV, they will go ahead and consume, using APIs, content about this CV from other sources. So they will have more context on how this vulnerability is getting exploited in the wild and what are the risks that it might pose to their environment. Same goes for the remediation. Maybe sometimes a certain KB might break the whole infrastructure, right? We saw that happen before. Microsoft likes to do that. Figuring out whether a certain KB, what's going to be the impact? Maybe we're going to deploy it on a certain server and the server never comes up again. And in that kind of scenarios, we need to know that we need to have a compensating control, meaning that we're not going to completely patch the software, but we're going to make a certain vulnerability unexploitable. We're going to block a port. We're going to deprivilege a certain process and things like that will make a certain vulnerability unexploitable anymore. And even if we're still going to have this CV popped up in our vulnerability assessment system and etc., we will always be able to say, okay, this vulnerability is less critical for us because we deployed a compensating control. By the way, using the content you can consume from vSociety, every time we upload a remediation script, you're also going to have a detection script attached to it. So once you're going to run a detection script, you're going to figure out that a certain asset or a certain vulnerability is affecting your infrastructure, you're going to run again the remediation script, and afterwards you're going to validate it again with X detection script. For our users and the users that use the community feeds from vSociety, the vulnerability is going to get completely eliminated once you're using both of them, the detection and the remediation script. The last thing is, of course, continuous monitoring, but I'm pretty sure all of you guys doing it, both for feeds that are being published online, but also when some of your assets are starting to act funky, when you know that certain assets have more vulnerabilities than others. Of course, it's always an easy pathway into your environment. So all of these stuff are tips that I want to give to you guys as free resources. And I want to invite you guys to join vSociety. We also have freemium version of the product, so you can utilize Nmap with VRX completely for free. We have 2 more minutes, so I'm going to open it now for questions. Any questions? No? Okay. Okay, cool. So thanks, guys. Thank you for listening. Oh, sorry. There's one question, sorry.
We've got a second round of claps.
Yeah.
I was wondering, moderation on vSociety, given that it's a social platform, how do you tackle moderation?
So we have 2 levels of moderation. The first one, nothing gets published into vSociety without an approval of our community managers. And afterwards, we have an internal process that we take the scripts that were validated inside of vSociety, that are already published on vSociety, and we execute them. We create another level of moderation there, and only if we see that everything is fine there, you're going to find them on our public script template inside of VRX.
What was the response to the previous exploits to write scripts that were AI generated? Once you implemented them, I believe it was called the vulnerable GPT tool into the community.
VonGPT? Yes. So first, you can go ahead and check it. If you want to play with the tool, and you can go ahead and do it yourself. Most of the time, we are training the tool not to do the kind of obvious patching. A lot of times, it will tell you, go ahead and patch the product, but we're continuously training it to go on different ways. Let's say Log4j, okay? You have Elasticsearch running on one of your servers. You need to upgrade Elasticsearch, right? But you can also find the Log4j jar with a certain hash, change it, and if you can see in the community that it didn't harm Elasticsearch, you will still be covered against Log4j when you're running Elasticsearch. So this is one example how VonGPT can work. And when Log4j came out, this is exactly what we did. We had a list of hashes of all the vulnerable Log4j jar files that, by the way, that they were in a bunch of apps that it took a lot of vendors a lot of time to figure out that they're actually affecting it. But what we did is we basically created a script that downloaded the latest version of Log4j and just replaced the file without patching it. So this is one way. You can also have other things. For example, Apache Tomcat, many times you have inside the configuration file certain configurations that might put your infrastructure at risk. A lot of times this kind of stuff are not even being used. Many times you might have admin 1, 2, 3, 4. And so a script that we created using VonGPT was a script that searched for web.xml in many locations. Once it found that, it just replaced certain strings and then validated that those strings are no longer exist in the file. Anything else? Okay, guys, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Assraf.